Okay, so I'm going to do another song here, and this one is it's called "Grown Men Don't Cry," and that's true if you are a rapper, probably. Uh, I don't know, but not if you like country music. It's not true. So this is a good. This song is a big hit. I think it's like 2001 or something like that by Tim McGraw, and really like there was a version that the one of the other guys that wrote it did. I thought that was really good. It was just a little bit different. It's kind of interesting because it's a little bit more ballady. It's not like country, but it's piano driven. Um, so it doesn't have a lot of the like Western things, that would make someone say like, "Why is this country?" Because sometimes you would think like if you have steel guitar and you have the various elements that make it have a Western sound, Telecasters and acoustic guitars and mandolins and fiddles and things like that, then it's like this is country music. But it's not just necessarily the instrumentation that makes it so. It's much more about the songwriting, the lyrics, and this one very much has that storytelling tradition, and like a lot of these other ones, it's got a progression as you go through the different verses, but it builds upon a theme, which in this case is about things that would make someone cry. And they're kind of these interesting little vignettes, and it's just got some really great lyrics I think are worth discussing. So let's hear it by this is a cover by a guy named Wyatt McCubbin. He's seems to got a pretty decent sized channel, like 6 or 7 thousand people, something like that. So, but he's pretty good. So it makes sense that he would have a good following. But here's the song.
I pulled into the shopping center, saw a little boy wrapped around the legs of his mother. Like ice cream melting, they embraced. Years of bad decisions rolling down her face.
So that's kind of the one lyric I'm kind of like, that's kind of weird. Ice cream melting, they embraced, but then it's thinking, or I guess the ice cream melting is analogous to the tears running down her face. Years of bad decisions running down her face. And, it's just interesting. I pulled into the shopping center. That's the first thing he says. Like, this is just like, yeah, you could read these, I guess, except for that metaphor, the lyrics here, you could just read them, like, and actually see, like, somebody just saying this, like relaying this to a friend or something. I don't think that somebody would just say, like ice cream melting, they embraced years of bad decisions running down her face. But that one line aside, it's just very casual, conversational, the way that he explains it. I'll keep going here.
All morning I've been thinking my life's so hard. They wore everything they owned, living in a car.
So here's just the shocking thing of, we're all thinking our lives are so hard all the time. We're very self-absorbed people. And then you sometimes just notice these things. And, I think that these are things God opens up our eyes to see. And you see people wearing everything they own, living in a car, a little boy and his mom, and it's just like, wow, what am I doing thinking that my life is hard?
Now I wanted to tell them it would be okay, but I just got in my suburban and I drove away.
that's the line I think that's like, wow, this is the most realistic song I've ever heard. Wanted to tell him it would be okay. Even to say like, that's even the sort of thought that's just like, did he even want to tell him that it wouldn't be okay, or did he just see that little boy and be like, I don't want that little boy to be sad. But what does he do? What does he do? He just got into Suburban and he drove away. And I think that's something that we probably all do a lot more than we would tend to admit. And it's very easy for us to just be focused on what we're doing and put our blinders on, go about our business, and assume somebody else will come along and will take care of that situation. So I just think, wow, that's a pretty honest lyric. I got in my Suburban and I drove away. And sometimes there may not be much you can do to materially help somebody in a certain situation in any given minute. But I think we have to think about, but capping it off with that last line is, he's not some great guy here or whatever. This is pretty real stuff, and the most real thing is that we tend to be self-absorbed, and we tend not to know how to confront pain or suffering when we see it, or even how to deal with it, or we have no concept of what we could do, and so our typical response is that we avoid it, look away, act like we're busy, go about our business. So that's a pretty honest lyric, I think.
And I don't know why they say grown men don't cry. And I don't know why they say grown men don't cry, don't cry. I keep having this dream about my
So that chorus, I don't know why they say grown men don't cry. It rhymes, but it could very easily just be something that you would just say. It's just a sentence that happens to rhyme. That somebody can say and honestly think. And then to repeat it, say But I don't know why they say grown men don't cry. I don't know why they say grown men don't cry. Don't cry. He's thinking this to himself. That last one is almost like, always we live in this uneasy thing, and it is a male thing, and it's like, oh gosh, I don't want to cry now. That's embarrassing. We get embarrassed when we cry, men especially. But there are some things that are worth crying for. And if you think about that shortest verse in the Bible, was simply that Jesus wept. And so he was the most grown man that ever lived. So I don't know why they say grown men don't cry, but it's something that we have heard and we all kind of deal with.
I keep having this dream about my old man. I'm 10 years old and he's holding my hand.
So there he's, whether it's a sleeping dream or a waking dream or whatever, but, dreaming about being 10 years old, holding his dad's hand. And then
we're talking out on the front porch, watching the sun go down, but it was just a dream. He was a slave to his job and he couldn't be around.
So there we get kind of, it was just a dream. Like, this is a dream, not even of a memory. It was just, I wonder what it would have been like to have a better dad. I wonder if my dad had cared more or whatever. He was a slave to his job and he couldn't be around. And it's really interesting. I think there's so much discourse, in red pill communities and kind of this stuff. And a really important book I think more people need to read is this book by Nancy Pearcey called "The Toxic War on Masculinity." And she talks about in there that really it was the Industrial Revolution that kind of took men out of a family environment, and because they needed to provide, they needed to go where the work was, and that was in the factory in the big city. They would basically the most basic function of being a provider of material resources for their wives and children's was all of a sudden not an integrated part of their family life like on a farm, but it was this separate thing. And that and it was necessary for the men to do it. Men feel that responsibility. They have to go where the work is. But they then are living a life where so much of their energy and attention is focused on work, and that's where they become comfortable, and that's the world that makes sense and they understand. And then you come home and it's crazy, and there's kids crying, and they're doing all sorts of stuff, and the mom is all frazzled or whatever, and it's like, I don't want to be a part of this. This is too crazy. I'm worn out from work. So I think that's where the temptation of workaholism kind of comes in. And it's sad that there's many people that are sort of saying that that's a normalization that we need to get back to. I'd say that's one area where I don't necessarily agree. And I would even say that, like, there's a desire to return to tradition, which is about the single income home and the stay-at-home mom. And stay-at-home mom is great, and it's really great especially for little kids. But it's way more important that kids have a good relationship with their dad than their mom be able to stay home full time. And then if two parents working slightly different arrangements allows for that. If a different arrangement allows for kids to have a better, closer relationship with their kids and their puppies, then overall it's really a much better thing, because the damage of not having a dad is way worse than the damage of kids not having a nice house and nice things and whatever. And especially these things perpetuate, because how are you going to learn how to be a good dad if you didn't have a good dad? It's hard. And, fortunately, people try to break out of these cycles, but it's hard. So, let's see here. So the last thing was, so it was just a dream. He was a slave to his job, and he couldn't be around.
So many things I want to say to him, but I just placed a rose on his grave, and I talked to the wind. And I don't know why they say grown men don't cry.
And so, okay, of course, there in the end, we get the thing, so many things I want to say to him, but he's dead. He placed a rose on his grave, and he talks to the wind. That's like, that's the finality of death. You can't go back. You can't do anything about it. So try to learn how to live now, and do the things that you can, and fix what you can. Fix your relationships before you don't get a chance to do it.
I don't know why they say grown men don't cry, don't cry.
And can't remember his little thing here. This is the final verse, another little vignette in his life. This is like, this could be one day. These 3 verses. It could just be one day that he's talking about here. But in that sense, it's like, it's very much an inward, emotional, reflective journey that happens in this song. It's a lot of what's going on in here, and the thoughts and the memories and the experiences. Starts off with just thinking is all morning. The first verse was a morning, so this may be the middle of the day, and then the final verse is an evening verse. So I think that's kind of the way we can think of it as far as the time goes. This is a single day that he's having these thoughts. Well, really, it's 3 minutes, but that's where the progression is going, and is it one thing springing off the next? Was he thinking about his dad because he thought about that kid with no dad, with just his mom in the shopping center, and now we get to the last part. He said, "At home," in this final verse. After the solo.
I'm sitting here with my kids and my wife and everything that I hold dear in my life. We said grace and thank the Lord. Got so much to be thankful for. Then it's up the stairs and off to bed, and my little girl says I hadn't had my story yet.
All right, so here's the same thing. Now he's being reflective again, but he's sitting here with his kids, his wife, everything he holds dear. They say grace. They thank the Lord. So much to be thankful for. And, then it's upstairs, off to bed. And, I haven't had my story yet. And sometimes, let me say this from this is a realistic take on this thing. Sometimes kids will say stuff because they just don't want to go to bed. They want to stretch things out. They want one more thing, a glass of water, another story, another song, etc., etc. But it does not take away from the next part of the verse and what happens in here. So, even compressing into a thing of being like, because sometimes you may feel like, these kids just have avoided actually going to sleep for an hour or an hour and a half by pulling all sorts of shenanigans. At the very end of all the frustrating things about raising kids, they, very much are still amazing little people that God gives us the privilege and responsibility of getting to know. And it's, from this side, from the fatherhood side of things, it's like there's no relationship that you will get to have such a big impact on as you will in having kids, which is kind of why it's like very sad when people say I don't want kids, and it's pretty sad when they say like one's enough or two's enough, or I feel like you should be, if you're not willing to, yes, there's more cost and more difficulty in having more kids, but if you don't think that more cost is worth the reward you get of another person coming into existence that you will get to know on an intimate, deep level, unlike any other friendship or relationship that you will have, then you should think a little bit more deeply. And, that's not to say, like, it's not for everybody to have a million kids or whatever. But, these are weighty things, and we shouldn't be too flippant. I think we kind of just say, like, culture says 2 is good, says 3 is great. That's kind of anything more than that's a lot, so that's where I'm going to be happy. Well, don't let culture be your judge. Think for yourself. Here's the last little bit of the song.
Everything weighing on my mind disappears just like that when she lifts her head off the pillow and says, I love you, Dad. And I don't know why they say grown men don't cry.
And of course, this is a very different type of tears. The first one is a tears of helplessness. He feels helpless in the light of not being able to do anything for that mom and her kid living in their car. The second one is, tears of bitter anger, resentment, sorrow that he doesn't have the chance to mend the broken relationship with his dad. But this one here is, it's a tear. It's tears of joy in seeing that love from his kid, and probably in a think about it, it's like he didn't have that. His relationship with his dad was so complicated that he was wishing that he had that experience, sitting on the porch, talking, holding his hand while the sun went down. He didn't get that, but like at least it's like with the question of like how do you be a good dad when you didn't have a good dad, and your kids can help a little bit, um, so then he just keeps singing the chorus a couple more times. I don't know why they say grown men don't cry. And this kind of reminds me of that C.S. Lewis essay, where he talks about like, we only have a certain amount of like emotional responses that we can deal, and even there's like I should put a little clip or whatever, but from the movie Coming to America, the mom and the dad are talking about like, I was so nervous to meet your father that I almost I was sick to my stomach. But then in time, I grew to love him, and the dad says, so you see, son, there's a very fine line between love and nausea. And that's to say, like, our bodies are only capable of a certain amount of like physical responses to emotional impulses, and so the same responses have to cover a lot of ground. And so to say like don't cry, crying's bad, well, sometimes crying is bad. Yeah, if you're a little kid on the playground and you're crying when you should be learning to grow up and be a little tough, yeah, that's when men don't cry. You don't act like a little baby. But if you see a need greater than your capacity to help and you cry, I think that's a reasonable thing to do. And if you have a relationship that you can no longer fix because death has caused, has closed the opportunity to mend that relationship, then that's a sadness that's worth lamenting. And likewise, if you have, this amazing response of feedback from your kids to know that you're doing a good job and that causes tears of joy, that's a good thing too. So, anyway, it's a powerful song. It's a pretty self-explanatory as to why it was successful in its day and why people are still covering it. And this guy's pretty good musician, so Wyatt McCubbin, if you want to check him out. I think as much as I can, I'll say check out some of these cover versions. I don't typically like prefer to listen to cover versions, but it is interesting to see how people put a little difference on something, even if they're not really changing the song in any drastic way. Just every individual's going to do something different. He does a good job. So that's the song "Grown Men Don't Cry," and hope you enjoy that. Let me know what you think, and thank you for listening.